What is the best and worst scene from each Star Wars movie? Anakin versus Obi-Wan, Vader's hallway scene, the trench run. Even better, what is the worst scene from each Star Wars film? Today I'll be looking at not just one of these questions, but both, and just for fun, we'll see which movie has the most varying highs and lows. Starting off with The Phantom Menace, for this movie the best scene is Duel of the Fates. Not only did this completely redefine lightsaber fights, where with the original trilogy we had more slow character-based scenes, where in the prequels we focused more on the choreography and the areas around the fights, but also there were great death scenes in this fight. Not only Qui-Gon Jinn, who was of course a very likable and central character to this movie, but also Darth Maul, who didn't technically die here but still was cut in half. Now the worst scene for episode 1 is the Jedi Council, because 1, Yoda is completely serious and not even remotely funny or witty like he was in the original trilogy, and then also the other council members do not talk at all other than Mace Windu and Yoda.
What about your mother?
Moving on to Attack of the Clones, we have the best scene as Shmi Skywalker's death. So here, this was of course a very important and dramatic moment for Anakin's turn into Vader, and also Hayden Christensen's acting was on point here as he completely sells the darkness that Anakin is feeling at this moment. Then we have Anakin complains to Padme as the worst scene in this movie. Anakin kind of acts like a whiny teenager here. I just don't really feel like that was an essential part of this movie, and yet George Lucas definitely threw it in here a lot. And also that little bit at the end where she says "don't look at me like that" makes Anakin seem pretty creepy. Moving on to Revenge of the Sith, the best scene for this movie is Anakin versus Obi-Wan, which of course has even better choreography than the Duel of the Fates, and also the emotional tension is at an all high here with these characters who were previously brothers that are now turned against each other. And for the worst scene, there's actually no bad scenes in Revenge of the Sith if you ask me. Moving on to the Clone Wars movie, for the best scene is the Battle of Teth. We never really saw any kind of vertical battle before. We never really saw the walkers being used in this way, so I thought that was very interesting. And also the dynamic between Anakin and Ahsoka is explored here, which is very interesting as well. The worst scene for this movie is Rada the Hutt when he is introduced, because he is not only annoying but is also childish to have this in a Star Wars film. Then again, you can barely really count this as a Star Wars movie. And the best scene for Solo, a Star Wars story, is the Battle of Mimban, which was at one point going to be even longer than what we got, but even the scene that we have in the final movie shows what it's like to be a stormtrooper up close, and also Han's origins are explored more here. And just in general, I think the beginning of Solo is more or less the best part of the movie. For the worst scene of Solo, we have L3 talks to Kira. Not only is L3 a very annoying character, but there's also this weird joke where she says,
"We're just not compatible."
How would that work?
It works.
which doesn't really make too much sense. And yeah, I don't know, I just don't think she's that good of a character, and really they're trying to do something kind of funny here, but it just didn't really work out, I don't think. And moving on to the other Star Wars story, that being Rogue One, we have the death of Krennic, Jyn, and Cassian, which could also be labeled as when the Death Star fires on Scarif. This scene is extremely dramatic, and it has the most important characters all going out in very interesting ways that add to their stories, with Krennic being destroyed by his own creation, and Jyn and Cassian giving their lives to the rebellion and to fight against the Empire. Also, the visuals here are completely beautiful, with the massive explosion radiating off of the beaches of Scarif's waters. But then also, many people would say that Darth Vader's hallway scene is the best in this movie, and while I think that scene is amazing and does really add to Vader's character, showing him actually like being extremely powerful after the prequels here, at the same time I don't think it's quite as essential to the story as is the scene that precedes it. And for the worst scene of this movie, we have at the beginning where Jyn talks to the rebellion. Not only does this make the rebellion kind of look bad, which doesn't really add anything to the story, but it also doesn't set up Jyn's character very well, because instead of having something that really shows who she is as a person, it just has her getting mad at the rebels for not doing anything. Now, what movie in all of Star Wars has the most varying highs and lows? For me, I would have to say Attack of the Clones. Now, I do think Attack of the the Clones is a very good movie. However, this is the same film that has action scenes like the Coruscant speeder chase, Obi-Wan versus Jango Fett, and everything in the arena, plus the battle at the end of the movie, while at the same time it has some really bad, boring scenes in the first third of the movie on Coruscant that don't need to be there, as well as some extremely bad romance scenes that show how bad of a writer George Lucas can be at times when it comes to dialogue. But moving on to the best and worst scenes from the original trilogy, we have A New Hope. For the best scene here, we have the trash compactor scene, which has great tension and is a very original idea, having the walls close in around our heroes. And then also there's great banter between Luke, Leia, and Han, as there is throughout the rest of the Death Star rescue sequence. Moving on to the Millennium Falcon escape as the worst scene of this movie, this is by no means a bad scene, however, it is unnecessary to the plot, and there are definitely better action scenes in the movie, so I had to pick one, and it is going to be this. For The Empire Strikes Back, I actually didn't pick the "No, I am your father" scene, and I went with the one right before it, which is Luke versus Vader. This is a very underrated lightsaber fight, considering that it has amazing tension throughout, and is really the culmination of everything Luke has been going through in this movie, with his training and his premonitions of Vader relating to him. But then there's also the great locations and choreography throughout this scene, with each area being more exciting than the next. And the worst scene in this movie is when the hyperspace on the Millennium Falcon finally works. To me, this kind of brings down the tension a little bit from where the scene was before, and probably they should have ended the climax of this movie with the revelation of Darth Vader being his father, but instead it goes on a little bit more with this scene here. And you know, obviously this is a good scene. There really is no bad scenes in The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it truly is a masterpiece and my second favorite Star Wars movie personally, but if I had to pick anything, it is this one, because I just think it could have maybe been restructured in a way that would have worked a little bit better with the pacing and tension here. Now for Return of the Jedi, the best scene in this movie is the victory celebration. Not only does this bring the prequels and original trilogy movies together with Hayden Christensen as Anakin among the other characters, but also this is the happy ending that everyone deserved in Star Wars. After all of the wars, conflicts, and tragedies, it all ends in a good way, and this just feels immensely satisfying. There's also the worst scene in this movie, which is when the Ewoks listen to C-3PO with all of his sound effects. This is completely unnecessary and is a great example of how there was way too much of the Ewoks in this movie, and also this feels too cheerful when the stakes should be pretty high at this part of the movie. I could think of it like, you know, a little bit of a rest along the journey where they're usually in great turmoil, but here they're a little bit more happy and have a moment of peace. However, I just think this doesn't really fit when we're getting towards the final battle of the Rebellion versus the Empire, which really isn't the final battle, but you know what I mean. But real quick, here's the Christian advice of this video. If you want to get back to the main video, you can skip to this time right here. Now today I want to talk about something from the New Testament where Jesus actually says that if you are to fast, you should not tell people about it, and you should in fact make your appearance in a way that it doesn't even look like you've been fasting. Basically, if you're doing a faithful act, you shouldn't really make this about you. You shouldn't, you know, boast about it to everyone. Oh, I did this and I'm so pious and close to God. No, you should cut that out entirely, and that's what it says. I don't know the exact verse that is from, but I'm sure my editor can figure that out. He tends to do a pretty good job with that. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's the same kind of idea that if you do something good, you know, shouldn't make it about you. It isn't like you should be able to do good acts for other people even when no one is watching. That whole idea. And getting back to the video, remember you can subscribe if you want to. I have some pretty cool videos, so you might want to check those out if you're new to the channel. But yeah, back to the video. Moving into the sequels, we have The Force Awakens, with the best scene being Han Solo's death. There is great drama here from Harrison Ford and Adam Driver, and of course with Han Solo, who we have loved for so long as a character, is finally dying. But then it is also very shocking and just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it just really is a big moment in the movie. And for the worst scene of this movie, I would have to say when Rey gets the lightsaber, because this was the moment when we realized that the really interesting character of Finn in the sequel trilogy was not going to be the main character, and it was rather Rey, who is a lot more simple, basic, and just confusing all around. Moving on to The Last Jedi, we have the Holdo maneuver as the best scene, because the build up to this is immaculate in this section of the film, and also it is visually gorgeous and something we'd never seen before, that being with a capital ship going into another capital ship at hyperspace was very nice. For the worst scene of this movie, we have when Rose saves Finn. This really doesn't make much sense because there's really no way of looking at how sacrificing yourself for the greater good could possibly be a bad thing. So her whole line about, you know, we need to not destroy what we hate, but save what we love, doesn't really make sense and kind of falls flat, because while on one hand, yeah, focus more on loving than hating, sure, but that's just, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense considering he was only sacrificing himself to save those that he loved. So it's just really a little bit of a paradox there, and this could have been a much better scene if Finn had sacrificed himself. It would have made his character kind of had a redemption at this point in the trilogy, but instead he just sits around in the background in the next movie and does pretty much nothing. Now, moving on to The Rise of Skywalker, the best and one of the few good scenes in this movie is kind of a mix between the Battle of Exegol and the return of Ben Solo. Obviously, Ben Solo coming back from Kylo Ren was an interesting turn, even if it is very similar to Vader's redemption in the original trilogy, and it was cool seeing another large-scale Star Wars battle. Also, for the worst scene is Hux is the spy.
I'm the spy. What?
I did have to choose between this and somehow Palpatine returned, but I decided that the actual scene when they say that line about Palpatine returning isn't really a bad scene, whereas Hux is the spy is a terrible scene because not only is this a complete waste of character, I mean, he just dies without any reaction at all, which was just done for cheap shock value, but also this doesn't make any sense at all because Hux killed billions of people at Starkiller Base and is just a terrible person, so him being the spy does not make any sense. He wouldn't help the Resistance. Maybe he would try to kill Kylo Ren because they, you know, have beef with each other.
I don't care if you win. I need Kylo Ren to lose.
But he would not try to help the Resistance. That just completely goes against his character. And if you enjoyed this video, then you might also like this one where I ranked every lightsaber duel from the Clone Wars if you click right here. But yeah, see ya.